And just before I announce our esteemed speaker, just wanting to remind everyone that April 13 is our next meeting. So we're going to have Nancy Stuller. She mostly does recycled art. So I'm really looking forward to what she's going to bring to the presentation and how she's going to handle her art demo. So this afternoon is all about art branding. And it's a pleasure to introduce our speaker, Rebecca Woodward. Is an artist from Indiana. She's originally from Colorado, I guess. Is an artist and arts educator helping artists develop their professional artistic voice alongside their art technique. She teaches classes in branding, classical drawing and painting, and anatomy. Over the last decade, Rebecca has participated in the arts in many roles as a student, a professional illustrator, an artist representative, and as a fine artist herself. Currently an MA candidate at the Florence Academy of Art. Is that in Indiana, Rebecca? Okay, anyway, I'll let you explain that. Her own work applies classically derived approaches with a contemporary focus on themes of seasonal nourishment by closely observing the beauties and bounties provided by her local environment. I love that artist statement. So without further ado, giving it to Rebecca Woodward.
Thank you so much. I am so thrilled to be with you all today and talking to you about branding. Like Zoni said, I am a teacher, I'm an artist, and I love getting to talk about branding, especially because I think it is one area of arts education that we often kind of put to the back, but it's very important to be able to communicate about ourselves and our work effectively so we can connect with the people who are going to resonate with our work. So I want this to be as interactive as it can possibly be over Zoom. I know that there are some barriers to that, but I will be trying to keep an eye on the chat throughout. Or I know you can kind of like raise your hand with an icon or something, which should give me a notification. So if at any point in time you have a comment, even though I haven't asked for them, please go ahead and bring that up, and I will do my best to recognize it. And there will be times throughout what I have prepared that I will be specifically asking for input. So I look forward to sharing with you all. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now so that I can show you this presentation that I've got. And I think the way it's going to work, give me a second. Oh, sorry, it's always this first bit of getting everything lined up where it's supposed to be. I won't be able to actually put it in presentation mode, but we should be able to see. So let me know if that has happened successfully with a thumbs up, somebody. Okay, great. So you can see the general presentation, and we'll start talking about this. Finding your brand, connect to why your market will love you. And we'll get into more about that. But like we said, I'm an artist here in Indiana. This is something I love to do. And I like to start by talking about what I care about as a teacher. And this really came from a piece of advice I got a long time ago that wasn't supposed to be related to, it was actually parenting advice, but has meant a lot to me as an art teacher too, that if you want to give confidence, give skills. So when we're thinking about, and I found that to be true, is when we feel insecure about something, it's often because we don't feel like we have the skills to approach that topic. So as a teacher, the more skills we can give to the people we work with, or as me presenting about branding, the more skills and tools that I can give you to tap into this idea of your artist identity, the more confidently you can express that. So that's kind of what we're going to be digging into today, is how do we find that confidence and these skills to communicate about ourselves. Now, I'm sorry I can't hide my notes from you, but I'm just going to make sure that I have covered what I wanted to from that slide. And that's essentially it. So here's one of our first interactive portions, and I really want to know where we are at. So please share and tell me what this means to you. When you heard if we were going to do a branding thing, what kind of thoughts or experiences did that bring to your mind? What is branding to you? How do you feel about it? Is it a positive? Is it a negative? Is it both? Do you feel like you already have a brand, and what does that mean to you? Let's kind of see where we are so we can meet there.
So you guys feel free to unmute yourselves.
Yeah, that works too for me. I see Julie says it's how to keep your image consistent across all platforms. Yeah, that's one element. What else do we have?
Does this mean I have to limit what I
Mm.
say to one subject matter, like landscapes, a certain type of landscapes?
Mhm.
Or
Yeah, the idea of branding as limiting is a very pervasive one. I'm glad you brought it up. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off though. Continue.
no, that's what I mean. Like I do a lot of landscapes, but I also do a lot of abstract.
Okay.
Landscapes are not limited to one area. It isn't just mountains or just rivers or
Mm-hmm.
oceans or anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of confused about how limiting this branding would be.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and we're gonna go over that as we keep moving. But I'm glad you brought it up so we can make sure we incorporate that.
Okay.
Susan said something about creating. Ooh, we're getting some things going. Creating a recognizable image. Okay. By recognizable image, I'm curious what you mean by that. Do you mean in a certain painting, or do you mean a logo, or both?
Okay. Oh, here I am. I was trying to stay incognito. No, I think, well, it would be difficult to say, like, we can say, oh, that's a Van Gogh. I don't think I could achieve that. But I
Oh,
think I have just to not be so scattered across different kinds of images that I would be, maybe it's more like the previous statement, more of a consistent
sure.
presentation.
Yeah. All right.
Um,
Zoni said, when someone mentions my name, what is attached to it? Like, oh, a floral impressionist artist, etc. Yeah, that's a good thought too. Is what's the tagline, the speech bubble or whatever you want to say when somebody says your name? If this were a comic strip, what would go there? Oh yeah, somebody else bringing up the concern. Adele, I'm sorry if I pronounce your names incorrectly. It's hard to get like the accents just when it's typed. Working about limitation, worries, concerns about that. Yeah, Michaela as well. So feeling like, how do I possibly create a brand when I don't really know what, they're not, not making the same thing over and over again. All right, Lori says, I struggle with what my brand is as I feel I'm in transition, evolving as I work in multiple disciplines, painting, wood felting, crafting with sewing, and book publishing. Even my books cross multiple genres. This is also an excellent point to bring up when you talk about branding, the idea of change and evolution. So, for example, you might think, well, what if I had a brand, had a set identity, but then I want to do other things? Does that destroy the brand that I've created, right? Or if I change, does that ruin this concept of my brand? And we're absolutely going to talk about that too. Lucy, thank you. Thinking of branding as an identity / message / image, which can be recognized as unique to my work. Okay. Yeah, it's that sort of like if it were poker, your tell, that somebody knows it's you. Liz Tucker, we are always making a brand no matter what we do. Are we always making a brand no matter what we do? Is it too commercial? And how do we get beyond the financial aspect of it? Again, an excellent question, which is something we're going to talk about as well. And I think that's a very important distinction of, is a brand a commercially derived entity, or is it something that is innate to us already? And how do we sort of parse between those and figure out which side matters under which context, etc., right? Okay, then I got a message that was direct to me, so I don't know if that was meant to not be shared, but we're talking about generally that the cost and the accessibility of art is different for different kind of brand identities, and how do we deal with that? Nancy mentioning, I would like to see branding as a way that an artist can be recognized, even with separate bodies of work. What I don't want branding to be is a rule that artists must not stray from a particular style or theme. Thanks, Liz. And can we vary our branding depending on what side we're showing, like art, assets of writing, teaching, etc.? So there's a lot of concern, it sounds like, in this idea of limiting yourself as an artist. And I'm really glad that we're having this kind of chance to see that this is a major concern for this group, because then we can dedicate more time to it later when we're doing the workshop portion of our presentation today. Because, you know, for other groups, they have different concerns. A main concern here seems to be that there's a general value for you in the ability to freely experiment and move from one project to another, and trying to find that, fill that need without it being a disruption to your ability to use a brand effectively to market and sell your work. Yes?
Yes.
Allison, that's kind of something that I'm seeing. Are there any other major concerns that come up when you think of branding that we can kind of like flush out right at this beginning stage, so that that's kind of our tone as we move forward?
I have that concern that you've expressed. As an artist, I feel like I'm a kid looking at the next shiny object and want to go, "Ooh, yeah, I want to do that." But, you know, I want to do something soft and, you know, that sort of thing, or something bold. And I don't know how that blends with, look, as Susan said, looking at something and going, oh, this is a Michaela Hughes painting, like you do with a Picasso or this. So, and that's what that's what I associate with branding, that it's like you look at a piece and go, oh, it's a whoever.
Right.
And I'm all over the place going, ooh, I want to try that. Yeah, I want to do that. Ooh, I want to do that. You know,
Yes.
So how to mix that. And
okay. Thank you, Michaela. That's excellent feedback and input as we kind of set the tone, like I said, for how we're going to move forward, because now I can see how we need, and this ties this well when we just, because I want to get through the next few slides before we really dive into it deep. But I think that this core problem or core concern relates very directly to what Liz Tucker said about the difference between a commercial brand and a personal brand. And we can sort of bring that together in hopefully a way that will make sense and give you the skills that you need to decide where to apply what tools. All right, so the next thing I want to hit, and a couple other comments just real quick moving forward. Can you stop and start and branding? That's an interesting conundrum. And then to me, branding is your signature. Like, do you mean your physical signature, or do you mean like in the sense of, like we talked about, like your tell, the thing that is sort of the unique quirk that shows up in your work consistently? Lynn, if you want to.
It's, to me, it's just the strokes you make, and more so the subject that you love. You know, it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's your sky, or that's your clouds, or that's your this.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Lynn. I mean, I think that's kind of what we talk about too. When we look at artists, we say, oh, they, you know, you can tell this was painted by this person because of those things, which are unique products of the way that they tend to see the world, right? And I think that's certainly an aspect of it. What branding is not, is a font, a name, or color scheme. And I'm actually surprised that nobody brought this up, or not very strongly, that, because this seems to come up often, is that we think of a brand as a font, a name, a color scheme, or some kind of gimmick associated with the presentation of a person's work. And that's not, that's absolutely not it. These things can become a part of your brand, but they don't create it. So when you're trying to say, I'm harnessing my brand to move forward and promote my work, creating a font or picking a color scheme or picking a name, that does not mean that you have branded yourself. It means that you have picked visual elements that you choose to associate with your work, but that is not the brand by itself. So the follow-up to that is obviously, well, if that's not it, what is? And here's the thing that I'm going to say as many times as I can before you start to shout at me. Your brand is the experience you consistently provide to your audience. Your brand is the experience you consistently provide to your audience. Say it with me. I want to see lips moving. Your brand is the experience you
Consistently
provide to your
audience.
Thank you. So this is the key, and it touches on a lot of the questions and concerns that we're having. Is your brand is an experience that is kind of curated over multiple exposures consistently over time. So if you don't kind of take anything else from seeing me today, say this to yourself like a mantra. This is the experience you consistently provide to your audience. Sorry, I needed a little drink. So when people interact with you or your work, oh, I have a comment here. Okay, yes, Michaela, how do we know what the experience is? So that's a very excellent question. And we are going to talk about it, I promise you. When somebody interacts with you or your work, that creates a small experience. And over time, the multiple exposures with you or your work, those experiences come together to form their key idea of who you are in that context. Now, the in that context part, I think, addresses some of what we've been expressing as concerns, because you've experienced this in your life, that you see certain people in certain places and other people in other places, and sometimes they never cross, right? So you can curate contexts for different sides of yourselves that will create different senses of who you are, right? This is an idea we're already familiar with because it's part of the way we interact socially anyway. You're a little bit different with this group than you are with this group, but you're still you. That's one way that we can think of the difference between, hey, if I want to do a bunch of landscape paintings, but I also really want to do abstract, felted, I don't even know, that's fine, but you're probably going to have a different community interacting with you because those are different contexts. And so you creating a different experience, and that's fine. Should your audience always be able to pick you out? I'm going to hold on to that one because we're going to talk about it later. We're going to be doing some stuff that gives us more access to what that means and what it doesn't. Oops. So I want to, just as a thought experiment, talk you through this hypothetical artist that is maybe an amalgamation of people I've met or not met, and what this hypothetical artist experiences that I would have with them, okay? And then we're gonna say, well, what does that do in terms of like, what, as a core experience, what might that look like when I think of them, and how does that tie to a brand identity? So let's say that this sort of myth artist is like incredibly amazingly skilled, master of their craft in every media, right? They can sculpt, they can draw, they can paint, they're doing this. I do classical realism, so that's kind of, I'm going to say that's the genre for this artist. And let's say they're very kind, very personable. Every time you talk to them, they just really zero in, they focus on you. So that's part of the experience I have with them. They're very passionate about their work. They love layered meaning and symbolism. All of these things are wonderful. And then they forget all the small details of their life. Every time I try and communicate with this artist, maybe I have to wait a month, or I need to pester them a bunch of times, or every time we're supposed to have a class or whatever, they're late, or they forget to tell somebody who's there. This is one sort of narrative surrounding artists that I've seen be true a little too many times, of an artist who is extremely good at what they're doing and maybe not extremely good at holding on to small details in their personal interactions. But that doesn't mean that you don't like being around them or aren't getting value, right? So if I'm trying to say, what do all these different experiences, some of which could be seen as positive, some of which could be seen as a negative, come together to create the consistent experience that I have with this individual in a branding kind of way? Thoughts?
I think they just need a secretary.
True.
There are going to be people that are not good at those skills. That's executive function. And a
Mhm.
whole lot of really high functioning fine artists are terrible in that other category.
Right.
Yeah.
But if this person wants to be in charge of the message they're sending so they can do it the most effectively, knowing this about themselves, what does that look like as a brand? As one core idea that
it's compromised. It would
Okay.
compromise the brand.
It's
Interesting.
sloppy. It's sloppy.
Yeah,
It's sloppy brand.
yeah, I agree with that. I can trust their work, but I can't trust them as an individual. And that means that my interaction with them is going to be on a very limited scale.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is a really great perspective that you're bringing up as to why it is so useful and important for an artist, especially one with these tendencies, to have an idea of what their brand is.
Or their skill set.
Or their skill set, because so if I were the spin doctor coming in to say, hey, this is what you're working with, all right, let's find a way to communicate with people who are interacting with you in a way that this is positive, right? That we're not going to tell any lies, but we are going to tell the most flattering truth that lets people interact with you authentically. So one version of that for this individual might be the sort of benevolent artistic genius who does not have time for these small tasks, like you said, the executive functioning things. Now, what that means, if he's going to take, or she, they are going to take ownership of that. This is my brand, is that I am committed to not sacrificing the high level of mental energy that I put into my work so that I can do it at the level that I do, and with the level of intention and layers and meanings that I do, because I care about those things so intensely. My executive functioning is not going to change. These things are still going to be part of me. And because I'm committed to my art in this specific way, well, that means I need to communicate to my audience to let them know this is my brand. This is what I do. I am so committed to my art that these other things are less important to me, and it will take time to hear back from me.
So you're basically controlling the expectations.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
That's
That happens
smart.
to me in the classroom. I forget my students' names all the time, and I let them know right up front, I'm not going to remember your names.
Yeah.
I tell them, write your names on something I can see,
Mm-hmm.
because I won't remember.
Right. And I mean, frankly, the reason you won't remember it is because that information is not important to you compared to other information that you're holding on to at the time. Right.
Mhm.
And for another person, remembering names might be an extremely high priority. And so they might come in and say, it is more important to me that I get everybody's name and say their name than that I convey this other information during a teaching session. Well, that would be unique to their brand, where yours is unique to yours. And that's really good to be aware of that trait and why you're making that decision, so that people who are going to learn from you are going to go because they want the extra things that you're spending time on mentally. And people who are going to go to somebody else who focuses on names are going to go to them because they want the extra personal touch that that person brings. So thank you for indulging me on that first experience. We're going to get into this a little bit more. So we talked on some of these things, but generally it's the idea of how is this developing or becoming aware of the experience that you're providing, and then taking control of your message surrounding that. Why does that work for you? Because if you are aware and you zero in on your artist's purpose and what you care about, right? What are your priorities and what are the things that are not your priorities? Then it lets you connect to your buyers that we're going to resonate with that core message that you bring, the priorities that you have. It gives them something specific to latch onto. And then this has been a huge thing too. As artists and as educators, you have to write about yourself all the time. You have to be promoting yourself all the time. Coming up with content can be extremely overwhelming when you don't have a framework to work within. Even with that, that can be daunting for some people. But this is basically the little box for you, is if you know, hey, this is my message, it doesn't become limiting, it's freeing, because now you know every time I need to write a message or write an artist statement or do a whatever, these are my top priorities. And generally, they're not things that are super specific to subject matter or medium. Your core values are probably consistent across those things. So that addresses, again, part of what we talked about of this concern of it being too limiting, right? Well, your core values are your core values, and probably the priorities that you put in your energy and in your interactions with other people are going to be fairly consistent across these different things that you do, unless you truly have like a complete alter ego, in which case, awesome, develop that. But this core message is not so much these sort of visual representations, it's beneath that. And when you have all this, you can generate more sales and income because you're connecting to these people that want your work and want you. All right, so as a follow-up to that, what is your brand? Your brand is you. Your brand is the experience you consistently provide to your audience. And that is generally made up of what you make, how you make it, and why you make it when you're talking specifically about your work. But generally, when we start to answer these questions, you get to some of the priority decision-making and the motivations that are more central to this sense of identity as a brand. And then as we move forward, your goal becomes to identify and communicate your what, how, and why in a compelling way that allows you to resonate with your audience and generate sales. Because we want to sell our art and people want to buy it, especially once they know who you are and why they love you. Okay, so when we go from this, somebody asked the question of, well, what do I do? How do I do this, right? How do I find the brand? This is a starting point, right? Over the course of today, we're not going to be able to successfully create a fully developed brand for each individual here, clearly. There's a reason that people pay a lot of money to have other people come and help them with these things. But you can get a long way with some of these basic elements, is brainstorming by first looking for the common threads in your work in terms of subject, theme, color, composition, motivation, light, etc. Think about what motivates you as an artist. And in each of these, a lot of it is you do these things and then the follow-up question is why? Why do I choose that subject? Why did I pick that color? Why do I compose it that way? What do you hope your audience gets from your work, and what would be an ideal interaction with one of your pieces? This question is interesting because it tells a lot about your priorities, but it doesn't necessarily let us know the experience you're providing. often your priorities and the experience you're providing might not line up, and that becomes very useful to find out so that you can create more consistency between those two things. I'll give you an example of that briefly, because as somebody mentioned before, well, how do you know what the experience you're providing is? Part of it is, in addition to all of this brainstorming, you need to talk to people who are experiencing you and your work and get their feedback as well. I worked with another group and I had one artist who was showing their work and describing to me, you know, their answers to some of these questions. And I asked them, you know, what do you think, like, what's your core message? What are you trying to accomplish? Like, what's the most important thing to you? And this artist said that they just want people to like their work. I just really want people to like me. I really want them to like my work. That's the most important thing to me. That was fascinating to me, looking at the work that they were producing, because the work that this artist was producing was using very bold, graphic, and even aggressive lines, lots of angular compositions of the figure, really bold, and I mean, not quite grotesque, but not traditionally beautiful. And the sense that I got from interacting with this person outside of that, them telling me, oh, I just really want people to like me and my work. Personally, I didn't get that sense from them at all. They seemed very much like I don't give a darn what you think about me kind of vibe. And that's exactly what I got from their work. And they were unaware of this contrast, that internally she's saying, oh, I just really want people to like my work, but everything that's coming out, the experience they're providing consistently is, I'm going to make what I want to make. I'm going to say what I want to say, and you just got to deal with it. Now, that's not good or bad. It is what it is. And so then the goal is to say, okay, well, if you inside are feeling like, man, I just really wish people would accept me or like me, but everything that you're doing is saying, I don't care. Let's let you become in line with the messages that you're already saying and say, I need to stop seeking for approval and embrace what I'm already making, already doing, so that I can find the people, confidently put it out there and find the people who are going to resonate with this work, right? As long as she was going to be dissonant from that message, she would not be able to confidently put her work out there, right? Because she's limited by this idea that, like, I may need to change my approach or do this or that so people will like me. Her work was not going to resonate with that type of population. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Awesome. So after you kind of got a brainstorm, we're going to practice condensing what makes your art unique into a single memorable statement or anecdote. These are useful exercises, again, that get you closer. This becomes a launching point for artist statements and future content. That's what we talked about. And here is the thing that we were also concerned about. This does not limit you as an artist. This does not limit you as an artist. Your work will develop and change, and your brand will develop and change with it. Having a starting part is huge for gaining momentum and finding your voice and your audience. One thing I wanted to talk about here, because this was such a big concern with this group, is what Liz brought up at the beginning too, the difference between the brand just being something that you already are and have, and being a commercial entity. Okay, I have one comment, which I'll get to in just a second. And there is a difference between making artwork to be commercially viable and needing a brand associated with that, and making art because you are an artistic person in general who generally likes to create. Those are different things. A person who is making art to be commercially viable, just as a launching point for you to have in your mind, would need to be producing between 60 and 100 minimum works of art in a year. What that does for an artist is, if you're producing at that level, the things that you've brought up about having your signature or your quirk or your tick or whatever it is, your tell, becomes something you don't have to work at because you're producing so much that it just happens. You don't have to create that. It just happens. When you're making enough work, it's there. So people will recognize you because over the course of building a large enough body of work, you have that just comes out naturally. And if you're producing in those quantities, then having a very commercially directed brand is appropriate because you're very specifically making artwork at a level and at a production rate that is intended to sell so enough to provide a living. That is a different thing than creating or harnessing the brand of you as a creative individual who wants to create work and do this or that or this or that and interact with people in a community that's not necessarily primarily meant for the sale of art at a level that would provide a living.
So that's the challenge. I mean, that's that pivot point, you know, if you are a committed professional artist, which means financially viable, I think, you know, I feel myself react against this, and I want you to correct me, but I do sense there's a limitation in the concept of branding. I'm known for my abstract work, and people know it by looking at it, that it's my work, but I am fascinated by plein air, over the moon, because I think it's really hard. And I love that. But how on earth, like, you know, because like a lot of people in this group are asking that question. But I think I hear you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it's not a problem if you're not doing this in a hardcore, fully professional financial way. There's no problem. But if you are producing 100 works a year, which sort of handles itself, it sounds like you can't jump out of those, you know, subject boxes as easily without quote unquote damaging the brand.
Okay, thank you for asking your question so that I can create more clarity. I appreciate that. And I'm sorry, I couldn't find who was speaking on my little Zoom thing. So I appreciate your comment, but I don't know your name.
Catherine, this is Catherine.
Thank you. I am not saying that branding only matters in one context and not in the other. What I am saying is the visual element of working out what your kind of signature as an artist is not something that you have to be concerned with, especially if you're producing at a high rate. But you still would absolutely be needing to be in control of what is the experience I'm consistently providing to my audience. And that experience is something that you'll need to be able to communicate with consistently and be in tune with consistently so that you can reach your buyers. Now, if your goal is not to be financially viable, but you do have a goal of making art and in some way connecting with other humans about it, then you would also need to have a clear idea of how do I interact with my work and what is the experience that I'm providing. And you will be more successful at connecting with people and engaging with your work and them if you have that consolidated idea in that context as well. Does that help clarify at all?
No.
No? Okay.
No, but let me listen. Let me just be quiet and listen to you more, because it may make sense to me as you
No,
go.
that's fine. I welcome questions because I always want to make sure that I am meeting the needs of the people I'm working with. And if I'm not, I want to know so that we can figure it out together. So I'm gonna look at those questions that I'm seeing over here and see if we can wrap all this together to find some sort of harmony. I've created different artist statements for different subject matter. I have different reasons for painting figures, portraits, landscapes, animals, etc. Is this the wrong way to make an artist statement? It depends on your context. A lot of it depends on your context. I write different artist statements for different purposes too. We all do this. There's nothing wrong with tailoring your content to a more specific audience after a broader audience. So the core of the brand, as I see it, this experience that you consistently provide to your audience, is not about it. The artist statement is not the brand. The artist statement is the things about you that motivate your work, which will generate an artist statement. So, and I see the hand, we'll get to you in just a second. So if you are not consistently providing any sort of one experience, then the experience you may be providing is that you are a person who is very, what's the word I'm trying to say, into a lot of different things, that you are varied. That might be part of your brand, that you don't do any one thing. Like if the consistent thing about you is that you're changing all of the time, that's fine. But there is always going to be some consistent element of why you are making the decisions that you are making. And that comes across to the people that you work with in the experience that you're having. Whether it's through the work, and the way you communicate about the work and the way they interact with you personally. And we reverse engineer that experience by starting to ask these questions that I've been talking about. Lucy, let's ask your question.
Yeah, I'm struggling a little bit with this this idea that there's a formula for this, and that you have to have 60 to 100 works a year that you're producing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So
because I think myself, I have a very distinct brand or look to my work. It's recognizable. It's, but it's nowhere near that is what I'm producing or I'm interested in. I think are you saying it's 60 to 100 if you don't have something that's recognizable and you will?
No, I'm sorry. Let me clarify that. That's the general rule. If you want to make all of your income from art sales solely, is that if that's all of your income and you want to make art sales and they're original works of art, not like prints or something like that, the general advice is 60 to 100 per year is what it would take to make that money, not to make your brand. Your brand is different from those numbers. I use that as a distinction between, you might have a different workflow and a different brand if you're producing at that rate than you would if you're not.
Got it. Okay, so that's kind of like an industry average is what.
Yeah. And clearly there's exceptions to that, right? There are some artists who sell 4 paintings a year and they sell them for a lot of money. And that's, going to be the way that they make their income. And there are artists who are selling a lot more than that because they have a really high throughput rate of less labor intensive works.
Right. Okay.
But this is the general sort of idea is if you are producing art in a way where you are making all of your living income for you and your family or whatever from your art, which means that you are spending at least a full-time job's amount of work painting and drawing, right? Then that's a different situation than if you're not doing that. And you create different brand identities based on how you are using your time. I'm not painting at that rate.
It's fascinating. I've never heard that before. That's why I was just kind of trying to understand. Interesting.
Yeah, and this is part of why I bring it up is because I feel like myself included, when you start doing art and you start this kind of information is often not presented on like what does it take to actually be financially viable, and what does that look like and what sort of mindset accompanies that versus art in a different context. Now, my job today and my intention and my viewpoint personally is not one where that is the right way to do it, and the wrong way to do it is to not be making 60 to 100 works a year. Mm-hmm. I don't live where I make 60 to 100 works a year, and I do not believe that that is the only valuable or important way to be an artist. I think that there is so much value in being an artist who is making whatever you're making for solely the general idea of art is important to you and you want to reach your community. Now,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
that's
Yeah, but I think it's really helpful because there is a lot of people, I think artists, it's easy to put expectations or get into a place where success is measured without really kind of understanding what success is in this realm. But
yeah. And again, part of the reason that I brought up that commercial side of it is because I think it's a really useful thing as an artist to decide where you are in that space. Like, is my goal really to be somebody who is 100% supported by my art financially? Or is my goal as an artist to be someone who can do art while having other financial realms of support, including teaching? And when you make that decision about where your priorities are, that does a lot for determining who you're going to reach and why.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, Liz, your point is absolutely right. I'm earning an income from teaching, which is important. That's part of my success, or any person who's teaching. Absolutely. And that will come across in the work that I make too, that I have a priority on teaching, me personally, right? Because, sorry, go ahead, Liz, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, that's Liz Covington who was saying that, but I to get to this point and to tie it together, I remember that there was a point where I had to decide, am I a teacher who paints or a painter who teaches?
Mhm.
And I decided I was a teacher who painted because my priority was teaching. And
Mhm.
I do produce a lot of work a year,
Yeah.
small pieces, but the focus is different because of that. And
Right.
how I output it and share it is different. But I think it is a very good distinction to have to make, is where is your priority? Because that is going to help you establish your authenticity, which
Mhm.
helps to validate your brand.
Right. Yes, because your brand is the experience you consistently provide to your audience, which means that in order to communicate it effectively, it's basically be authentic, right? And people will resonate more with you if they know that the experience they're having with you is aligned with what you're saying.
Mhm.
If you're providing one thing, but telling yourself and other people another, they will not resonate with you.
Mhm.
So we try and find the point where these come together.
Mhm.
All right. So let's have a little fun. Let's have a little fun for a minute. I like to do this where we get to say, okay, we've talked a lot about brands. Our brains are exploding. This is a lot. Let's look at some artwork and see in the simplest way possible, what do we get as a brand identity from these people? So here are some successful brands, people who uniquely have like brands that are very recognizable and exploding. So I haven't put the names of these artists. I would love it if we could have people shout them out or put it in the comments, and tell me which.
Kincaid.
Yes.
The first one, yes.
Painter of Light.
Yeah.
Bob
Who's the
Ross.
middle?
Oh, I don't know that one. I know Bob Ross is the other end.
Raphael?
Yeah,
Is that Raphael? Rebecca?
no.
It's Rubens? Yeah.
Yes, it's Rubens.
Rubens, yeah. Oof.
Yeah. And then
Now,
Bob
what's
Ross on the
unique
end.
about these artists is that they had taglines, all three of them, including Rubens. He was known as the Prince of Painter and Painters and Painter of Princes. Like he went out there and was like, look at me, everybody, I'm amazing, you know? and that's how he was celebrated in his time. So these are fun because they're pairing the image with the tagline, and it was consistent. Every experience with these people, I mean, Bob Ross is such a great example, where he did these paintings and he always is talking, happy little trees and all of that stuff. And every interaction you have with a Bob Ross experience is all about happy little trees, right? These things that make you smile, everything's okay, and the pictures, the everything is all about just kind of making you feel good. Thomas Kincaid, he does the same thing, but a different vibe. It's all about light and coziness. And then Rubens is just showing the heck off. His whole thing is that I am the best painter and draftsman there is, and I am going to do the most complicated, elaborate paintings for the most fancy, amazing people. And he lived that kind of life. So these are people who are in line with their brand, and we know it.
Mhm.
Okay. So now we're going to do some more sleuthing work and look at some other artists. I have some slides of a bunch of images with different artists' work, and kind of like talk about what are the things that you pick up, and what might be the core message that's consistent for this person.
Wow.
Okay, so yeah, so his light and dark, obviously his chiaroscuro.
Caravaggio.
Mhm.
You always know where to look. There's no ambiguity.
It's composition. He's really strong on composition.
And it's also movement.
Yes.
Drama.
Lighting too, even if
Yeah.
it's dark.
Like
where
stage
he
drama.
reflects the
Yeah.
lights.
Yeah,
And-
that theatricality of it.
Interaction between the
Dramatic.
subjects.
What about like an emotional read? Like what kind of emotional response do you have to a Caravaggio painting?
Religious.
Religious and definitely some sadness,
Yeah.
darkness.
Yeah, we're talking, Joan, thank you for your comment. Raking light and deep shadows, composition, drama.
They
Yeah.
all teach a lesson or try to teach a lesson, a biblical lesson.
Do you feel like even though these are religious, do they feel reverent to you?
No.
Yes.
No,
They're oppressive. It feels,
Melodramatic.
it feels oppressive.
Oppressive. That's an
yeah,
interesting.
totally oppressive. I agree with that.
Mhm.
It's like you could be the lead character in any of these images. You better watch yourself.
Yeah.
Except for the elfin guy on the left.
This is
Yeah.
Stick Bob.
This is
Looks
Sister Bob.
like he's about to puke. Like
They're all very tragic also.
Mhm.
Tragic, that's a good word.
Stories.
The eyes are tragic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh,
Traumatized.
So
it
what do we
looks
get
like
from
life frozen in time.
Yeah, that kind of crispness to it.
Yes.
It's sort of unflinching crispness.
So this is a good moment to bring up what I was trying to speak to earlier.
Sure.
It's not like Caravaggio can suddenly take a right turn and start painting landscapes with no figure.
Right. Yeah.
Well, he would have no money to do that because the church was the only patron. So,
Okay, yeah.
he was limited by that.
Yeah, it was a genre.
Yeah, so maybe he was doing landscapes and we just don't have them. Like we don't know. Maybe he did that in his spare time, but I think he was too busy drinking and murdering people.
Yeah.
Frankly.
But I think
Historically, there were a lot of painters who were quite accomplished through their paid craft and painted very differently.
Yes,
for their own enjoyment.
Otherwise,
And
yeah.
didn't they work on commissions? So some of them already were
Mhm.
established to be.
Right. What do we know about Caravaggio personally? What might a personal interaction with him be like?
Dangerous.
Yeah,
Dangerous, yeah.
Very intense.
Intense. Yeah.
Irreverent.
Yeah.
Talk about a guy who would blow you off. It's just,
It's
scary
scary.
back to the easel.
There's a lot of confidence and self-assuredness there. He's exactly knowing what he's doing.
Yeah.
Libertine.
These are great points. I mean, I'm gonna quickly tell
Was
these
he
are some
also-
of the things that I've drawn from him is that he's fascinated between the struggle between light and dark, right? That conflict. He's got dynamic angular compositions. These are some of the things. That he used common people for models, right? often the
Mhm.
lowest of the low. I mean, I think he's famous for using a drowned prostitute, or maybe that was common practice, for a model for Mary when she died, as a painting of the dead virgin, which was obviously a contrast in subject matter and subject matter that would have created a lot of dissonance. So my personal idea of what Caravaggio's brand might be is essentially the idea of conflict. He is conflict embodied.
Yes.
That is everything that you might experience when you interacted with him, and everything that you see in his work. Now, obviously, I don't have the privilege or not of seeing him in person. So we can only make guesses now, but that might be one thing that I see that comes through everything that he does, is he provides an experience of conflict. Now, he uses specific tools to do that. And we can make guesses as to why he does that. So earlier I said, when we're starting to break down your brand, we can break it down into these things: what you make, how you make it, and why you make it. And I think we see that here. What is he making? We talked about he's making these religious paintings. Why? Well, partly because the church is commissioning him and they're the big patron, but also when he's choosing the scenes and how he's arranging them, all of those decisions he's making reinforces the why that I'm attributing to him of he is a conflicted person. He is a person steeped in conflict, and that comes through everything that he does. So for the reach of his religious work, I think part of the reason that it resonates so much with people now is because people feel conflicted about religion, about the role of these figures and their stories and their lives. And part of why he resonates, I think, with an audience is because he was so very clearly a sinner, but steeped in a religious culture, right?
Yep.
So we can break his stuff down and say, he made this, he made it this way, made these decisions, and why, and get pretty quickly, because we have the benefit of history, to an idea of what maybe is the core of what he's communicating every time. And if he stays on message, that resonates with people in a powerful way, right? All right. But that's not limiting him. It's just saying this is who he already is. Here's another one. I picked these two because Rembrandt and Caravaggio are essentially contemporaries, doing a lot of the same things, but very different.
Very, very different. Yes.
So shout them out.
He seems to enjoy the dark
I was
figures.
gonna say dark, yeah.
He's contemplative.
And I think that was a genre at that time, darkness against light, the chiaroscuro was so prevalent at that time.
There's a nobility about his work, and not so angry
The
as
shadows
Caravaggio.
are just
Yes.
so impressive.
I think he's very interested in form on top of form. So it's a more, I wouldn't say Caravaggio is not intellectual, but Rembrandt seems to be a more intellectual painter. He studies himself as a model, because he wants to continue to paint and have, keep his skill set up even when he didn't have commissions and models around him.
Right.
Yes.
And he, knowing a bit of history on Rembrandt, it's kind of tough because, he paints these amazingly huge pieces that will incorporate a lot of his patrons when they agreed to the paintings that he did, and he agreed to paint what they wanted. But that wasn't always the case. And I don't know that shows necessarily in his work, except that he's always looking directly at the viewer. And there's he's not an in your face, I don't care what you think.
No.
But it is more, I am what I am.
Yeah, I think I love that. And one of the ways that I have interpreted this element of his work is it's more of an invitation.
Mhm.
It's kind of that, you know, the softness of the light, the smallness of the focus of the light, often how diffuse it is, and those eyes bringing you in says, come into this gradual unfolding experience that we're having, where you can keep looking and see a little bit more and see a little bit more and make a connection with me as
Yeah,
the painter or
it's
my
kind of
subject.
like, can you see me now? You know, like, can you
Yeah.
hear me now? Can you see me now?
Can you hear me now? Good. Just kidding.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Although I've seen another aspect of his work
Mm.
that's kind of provocative.
Hmm.
You know, the couple in bed.
Oh
and
yeah.
Very different things. It kind of fascinated me because these are sort of straight laced. And it was
Yeah,
nice to see something looser, you know. that-
different. Yeah,
more
he was
realistic.
perceived as bipolar in later
Yeah.
history. That's why you would see various kinds of media.
Right. I mean, somebody mentioned, Joan, you made the comment, psychological, right? This sort of
Yeah.
cerebral psychological invitation. I think of him as being very human centered. So all of these things come together to his unique experience. And maybe we know a little bit less about him, but these are some of the things that I sort of draw from his work. And I think of him where here, all of this drama makes us uncomfortable, makes us feel conflicted,
Yeah.
makes us
Truly.
feel like, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah,
Painful.
hard
It's a little painful.
Yes, yes. And you don't really want to be in this scene, but you can't look away either. But here it's more of an invitation. It's that,
Yes.
come in, come a little closer, get to know
Mhm.
me, get to know my subject, and warm and soft in the way that he's doing that. And there's all these layers, there's the intellectualness, but at the root of it is his feels like a human connection. That's where he's excited in his work. For my, you know, obviously I'm not the authority on Rembrandt or any of these things, but if I were to take a stab, that might be one thing that I could say he could build a brand around. Now let's see, we've got some time. So I have some more of these. Let's do
Yes.
this guy.
Oh,
Ooh, my favorite.
Michelangelo.
Mhm.
Let's see.
There's a lot of heart and love.
Hmm. Yeah,
Mm.
I think that's an interesting note. I hadn't thought of that specifically, but I see that it's there, you know, and I love that that's something you pointed out.
And there's always action in his figures.
Mhm.
Nothing is just standing still.
Lots of
Even the
movement.
statues look like they're about to move.
Right. Julie, the master of the human body. Yes, he is obsessed with and clearly incredible working with the human form, right?
Mhm.
Yes, he made it a point to go to the room with the dead people and watch as they,
Yeah.
you know, disassembled, just so he would learn all of. I mean, he was such a loner that he spoke
Yeah.
to the marbles and his materials rather than talking to people.
What are some of the myths about Michelangelo as a human? You brought up some good ones there.
Yeah.
Have you heard the one about where I don't know if this is true or not, but that he didn't take his shoes off for like
Yes,
years?
and that stuck to his skin.
Yes.
With
He was always
months,
just
it would, yeah,
filthy, covered in dust and dirt and
Yeah.
paint.
I know.
And although
He got sick while painting, and he would just go on and on and on while
Mhm.
sculpting and all that.
I think the emotional one that I always loved is the bottom center of the figures touching. I guess that's God and angels, and
Sistine Chapel, I
Yeah.
love that.
I just
Yeah,
love that one.
And the layered symbolism here that, you know, Adam is created out of the mind of God, and he's
Mhm.
floating over to him on this pink brain.
Oh, I never thought about that.
Yeah,
How about that?
to the earth.
and to me, although he's working with the marble pieces, I still see a softness in his work.
Yeah.
Softness.
It's soft. You're right. I love
It's
the
the
lines
form.
and
Yeah.
Yeah.
the
That you are
colors are
seeing all
beautiful.
that. Nothing is cut out in a like graphic sense,
Right.
but built.
There's a sensualness to it. If you look at the Pietà, in
David, too.
yeah, the David, but even with his fabrics, there's a quality of a soft texture to it, even though you're working with stone.
Yeah.
Even when he's drawing the anatomy, there's a sense of sensual reverence about what he's drawing and what he's expressing and how the human body is created.
Yeah.
I like that.
A great deal of respect, I think, for
Yes.
God's design.
Absolutely.
A lot of the a lot of the artists like Da Vinci, who was so envious and in awe of him, but they really admired his work, even if he was so much younger than they were.
I love that, and I love that you're sharing that, because our Da Vinci's our last one. And Liz, what you said, I think is as good a summation as we can get. This appreciation and respect for the human form is his maybe utmost, or God's creation's concern as he's working, is I'm going to show in the most elegant, beautiful way possible what an incredible thing this is. So then we have Da Vinci, like you said, they were around each other, although on different ages, and
50 and 25.
Yeah.
He was half his age.
Yes. And here's a much different approach, right?
Yes.
Much different. Although they're concerned with similar things. But I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, because I want to give you a chance to at least start on getting into your own work. But we see with Leonardo da Vinci, he is the analytical mind that wants to know how things work and how they get put together. And he's a draftsman first, right?
Yes.
Michelangelo is a sculptor first, and he's all about that form. Da Vinci is a draftsman first. How does it go together? And I'm going to get everything right
He's a
where
scientist.
it goes. Yes, and that is his thing, and that's what we get from him. That analytical mind created works of art, created inventions, all of these things. Yeah, static and formal, different juxtaposition, and we could take that forward if Leonardo was looking for some branding help, right? But you see, it's my point with all of these is that there's a through point, that their work isn't the brand. It connects you to their priorities and their decision making, and that's what creates the brand, the experience that you're having with them. Yeah.
Yes, because
definitely.
if you were a king, you would be saying, I need Da Vinci because he is going to help us create something for war. And because he is so analytical and so mathematical and such an engineer that, yeah, the guy can paint, but he can also create these incredible pieces of machinery that we'll be able to use.
Right. Yes.
Branding would be hard, Rebecca. Oh, would you?
It's I think the hardest thing about branding is realizing that it's something that is already there in you, and going through the steps of getting out your own way to find it, to find how do I really think? How do I really make decisions? What really are my priorities? Where do I really want my work to be? And is what I'm doing consistent with those things?
And I don't think any of the people you showed had any problem highlighting what they are working with and pushing them forward, their explorations.
Right.
They're very clear on what their exploration is about.
Yes.
And I think
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that at this time, with all the masters, the market was really between church and the royalty mostly, I think. So branding particularly must be a little bit different from what it is now.
Yes, and that's a great point that we don't have. I like the Ninja Turtles comment. That there's a different system now than there was then. And we have a lot more variety now than there was available then, which I think is an exciting prospect because it means that you can more easily do whatever interests you and find people that will also be interested in that thing. It's hard to get there without this level, though, of real reflection and honesty on what you're about. What do you make? Why do you make it? How do you make it? And how are you making those decisions?
Mhm. I
So,
agree.
and how does that contribute to the experience that you consistently provide to your audience? So we only have a short little bit left here. We've only got 11 minutes, but I want to leave you at least with an idea of what this will look like for you in your own work. So I think that we said bring some images of your own work that you think is most representative of you. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Now, for anybody who's
Or
done
you can
that,
have them online, like you can share your screen.
yeah. So I'll quickly kind of tell you, essentially, this is what would be where I would go from here if I were you at home after this workshop or in the next few minutes, is I would line up the things that I think are most representative of me. And one way that I might know that it's most representative of me is that I feel really happy when I see it, that I look at this artwork and I think, yeah, this feels great to me right now. Not, I was so proud of that when I did it, or that was fun, but I want to do that now. But I feel great about this right now. I still resonate with this piece. It's interesting to me. You might have notes on like, technically, I wish I could have done that better, blah, 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 because we all do that. But in general, it's a piece that you feel like, I'm still really happy with how this is. And it's still something that I feel like I could see myself doing more of. And you can have variety, like they don't all need to be landscapes or all be whatever, but whichever ones you're looking at need to have that, you need to have that connection with this piece to where you really feel good about it. Like, this is me. And then start asking yourself these questions of, well, okay, this piece or this group of pieces, what have I made? Why did I make that thing? How did I make that thing? It's useful when you go through these questions to not think of them purely in literal senses, but you can start there. Otherwise, we get a little too stuck. So if somebody wants to be brave and like put a piece up on the screen, maybe we can do this together to give you an example of what we're talking about. And I will stop sharing my screen.
Okay, and I'm going to remove your spotlight, Rebecca, so that if someone wants to share, I can
Right.
spotlight that person.
Perfect, thank you.
I can grab a piece if no one's gonna, I can, since I've got one.
Start, Liz.
I have my website up. I can share from there if that's easy.
Oh,
Sure, if you want to share screen on your website, that's fine. Or Liz gonna grab a piece.
I can share a piece too.
okay, me too.
I
I'll
can't
just
tell
do
who's
it on
saying
the-
anything, so I need
All
you
right.
to raise a hand or put a comment.
This is,
Okay, so yeah, where am I gonna start, Rebecca? You lead this.
so I have my website up as Lucy.
Okay, so
Oh,
hang on,
okay.
Lucy. So I'm gonna spotlight for everyone.
And then let me go to screen share. It's still not,
Unless you're a co-host. I'm
yeah,
not
the
sure you
host
can
has to
share.
disable. Yeah, I mean, the host has to, yeah.
Sorry, yep, you're right. Hold on one second. Hold on, give me one sec here. Give me a second. Remove that spotlight. All right, Lucy, there you are. I'm gonna make you a co-host. There you go.
Okay.
And Lucy, when you're done, I think you're gonna have to stop your
And
co-host.
then also do a stop share.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you see it?
No,
For me, your screen is black, Lucy.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Hold on. But no, that should,
New share. I think you have to click the new share on top.
I clicked it. Let me do it again.
It didn't go.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Okay, there we go. Hold on one second. Let me hit my share. And then let me go on here. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, wow. It's nice.
I'm not seeing anything.
You don't? It
I
should
see it.
I just see a Zoom. How do I get it myself back? I don't know.
click on your Zoom link.
We do see it. Yeah,
see
sometimes
Yes,
the
I can see
co-host
your,
I
I
can
see
see.
can
it.
see your work.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
This is a piece I just finished a little while ago.
Oh, crap.
How many colors is that, Lizzie?
But let's stay on track with
Okay,
what
yeah.
Rebecca wants us to
Right.
do with this.
So if this, do you feel like this single image is one that you are really just like, chef's kiss about for yourself?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's deeply reflective of my work.
Okay, awesome. So let's start to discuss this. Tell me, for you, what is this? What are you making here?
Okay, my work is, so do I talk now generally as to what my work is?
I think it's easiest when you start out to be as literal as possible, because that will help you avoid getting into like some of the little distracting things we tell ourselves.
Okay, so I say this is reflective of this is a 7-month project. It's a large piece.
Okay.
And it reflects, it's a movement through internal, external images, many of them influenced by places I've been, places I've
Okay.
dreamed of, and moving in and out of the external world and into the internal world and internal process.
Okay. So this is essentially how large is it?
This is what, about 5 by 4 feet?
Okay, very large.
60 by 48, yeah.
Because that's going to be part of the experience, right? Unfortunately, over the screen, we can't have that part of the
Yeah,
experience.
you also
but
can't
that's-
see, you don't see, there's a lot of texture to this, so you cannot,
Yeah.
that, I need to have work on the photo because it doesn't pick it up.
So that's part of the next question, is you've made this very large abstract representation of internal and external landscapes.
Mhm.
And how did you make it?
Okay, so when you're saying how, can you help me with that question?
Sure. So you mentioned that there's some texture there. How did you create that texture?
So very specifically, so using multimedia, primarily acrylic paints, ink, let's see, some collage, and I also very specifically used this with, what is it called, lava gel. When there's a layer in here that's a layer you don't see, that's separate from, that's a textural layer. So one of the
Okay.
layers that I applied to
Sure.
this, you don't actually see it reflected here. You have to,
Mhm.
it's a different layer than the one you see in front of you, the
Right.
different images.
So then, as to then the why, I think is going to come into a little bit of what you talked about. That's also part of the how of, it's a long-term project exploring different locations. Am I remembering that correctly?
Not
Is that-
locations, experiences. It's a land, there's a visual component, it's a visual manifestation of actual visual images, as well as internal experiences. And they may be non-visual experiences.
Right. So it's intended to be kind of emotive and cerebral or surreal in some element. Does that feel like it resonates with you?
Somewhat, yeah.
Okay. Why did you make this, or why are you interested in this piece?
But this is part of it. This is the last piece I did in a series called Mapping. And what my attempt was actually that, to map kind of the internal and external, the coming together of the internal and the external physical and non-physical journey.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, physical and non-physical journey.
Yeah, exploring it for me. Mapping. It was mapping is actually came up in a dream. It's mapping the journey is what really came up in the dream. And this,
in the dream. So this is very much relying on the concept of dreams. That's
dreams
a part
informed
of
by, well, the subconscious dreams. It's relying on it's a coming together of the visual and the visual world and the emotional, internal, energetic experiences.
Okay. So there's a lot of great stuff going on here and stuff we're starting to get into. And I don't want to close out in a way that will minimize the work that you've created here. So I'm not going to attempt to make like a, this is your brand statement, because I think that would not be appropriate. But I do think that what we've started to see is this is kind of the process that you can take on within your work, to start asking these types of questions. One thing that I'm noticing, talking to you, Lucy, that is something that we tend to do is go in and out of statements that are already artist statements. Like, oh, it's an expression of an internal and external world. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's often really helpful when we're trying to create better concrete communication and understanding of our work to avoid jumping to the conclusion and focusing as much as possible on getting to the underpinnings. So saying, okay, I made this, and part of the reason that I asked how you made the texture, how in what mediums you use and what size it is because all of those things tell me a lot about how you work and why you work that way and who will be interested in your work. If you're using acrylic paint and gel mediums and ballpoint pens, and making work like this that is very exquisitely created and interesting and has this kind of free flow nature, it is not going to appeal to somebody who has an analytical mind like a Leonardo da Vinci, right? Like, that's a different audience than yours. So you would be wasting time trying to talk to that person and convince them that your work is something they need to care about, because it's not their priority, but it is a priority for somebody else who really resonates with those mediums. Your mediums are perfectly appropriate from your work. They are less archival than other mediums. That might matter to people too, and is in reinforcing your message because it's sort of this ephemeral experience, the dream state that you're talking about. So finding ways that your mediums connects with your messages, connects with your, all of that becomes important too. And you can keep going at this. You talked about the juxtaposition between physical reality and dream reality. I'm seeing that in the way you have this large twisting mass coming in front of us, bringing us in, and then going into something that looks very much like a bridge structure. And we could talk a lot about this piece for a long period of time, but all of these elements, when you break them down, you can tie them specifically to different audiences, different intentions, and different, or the same, rather, audience and intention, that it reinforces what you're trying to do. Is that coming across?
Yeah, so just so, because I'm trying to understand in terms of this branding idea, though. So I mean, one of the problems with this, I think, at least for me, or those of us that really dwell in the abstract realm, is it's often very difficult, particularly doing non-representational work. You know, I mean, there's a representational aspect of it, but in this more non-objective realm, is how to find the language. And I think it's very difficult, you know, because I get that it's analytical and it's steeped in something that you might find in others, so which makes it not very helpful. I understand that, but it's really, isn't that a brand though? I mean, isn't that a way of talking about it?
I'm a little confused by your question.
So we're talking about a brand, right? And so I think about a brand as saying, okay, this is, so if I were to say like this, that I would do non-representation, or I would say, you know, someone would say, it's like, I do abstract, non-objective primarily work. And then I could talk a little bit more about, you know, the internal, external experience. And that I think people would understand it. So that would be a brand, but it's not unique to mine. So it's what you're saying,
Yes.
like, it's fine to have those overall, the way we talk about our artwork is fine to have kind of an overall description that people can understand, because that's what language is anyway, right? It's a way for people to understand. And then it's about kind of going down deeper and saying, the kind of stuff I do is, and be more specific, like, or this was informed. That's what you're saying. Okay.
Yes, be more specific. And it's fine to have stuff that you say that's easy to communicate. But in addition to that, though, if you have a core understanding of what you're making, how you're making it, and why, in a way that's very aligned with the experience you consistently provide to your audience, because that is your brand. It's the experience you consistently provide to your audience. So that exploration of digging down deeper, digging down deeper, digging down deeper, till you really know, this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm doing it, and this is why I'm doing it. Then all of the language that you use to describe your work, you can check to see, does it align with this uncovered truth about me? This is what I'm making, this is why I'm making it, this is how I'm making it. And does it align with the experience that I'm providing to my audience? And so from here, from talking about your work, from, let's say that we had very effectively gone through and found this core identity person thing about you that we could condense into a single statement, like we talked about earlier, then you would say, okay, I have this thing, which I believe is the experience that I'm providing. And now I need to talk to my audience and see, is this the experience that I'm providing? And find a way to make those meet. Now, having that written thing means that when you say, okay, I'm an artist, that I make abstract paintings that are non-representational, and they do this and this and this, you can personalize it. And that makes it yours and not somebody else's. Because you're personalizing it with your motivations, your how, your particular interest that another artist does not have, which is why somebody who was looking for abstract non-representational work will choose yours instead of somebody else's.
Okay, my struggle is, so when you're saying that, the brand doesn't necessarily, can be somewhat generic, right? I mean,
no,
I mean,
I think that we're having I think that you're not quite seeing brand in the same way that I am, and that what you write about yourself and your artist statement is not your brand. Your brand is the experience that you provide to your audience consistently.
Okay.
The experience you consistently provide to your audience. So that's the part that makes you unique. That's why people come to you. It's not because of your artist statement.
Okay, got it. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Now, I know we're out of time. I appreciate you guys so much inviting me to be part of this community for today and sharing this. I hope it was helpful. And as my final thing that I will say to you, so that you can effectively shout me out of the room since we're out of time, is, what is a brand? It is
The experience that we provide
to your audience. Okay, thank you. Keep that in mind. I wish you all the best of luck, and I hope that things move forward well for all of you.